What's up, fellas? It's Leonidas here. I want to talk to you guys about the Super Bowl, give you guys a recap. Maybe I should have done a prediction video and then a recap video, but this is my second channel, so just forgive me because I'm just trying to get the schedule of trying to film what I'm going to talk about and things like that. But I want to talk about the Super Bowl because it's my favorite sport, like I said before, and it's the biggest game, and it was a close game, so I need to talk about it. But I want to talk about how unusual the game was because I thought it was going to be pretty close because it was like the number one scoring defense versus number one scoring offense. So that's usually going to work out to be pretty good. And first off, I'm going to say it's not one of the best Super Bowls of all time. That's my opinion. I think a lot of people are going to say that. Some people, a lot of casual fans may say, oh, it's the greatest Super Bowl of all time, but I've been watching football for a long time. I'm a big time football fan. And just watching it play by play and just quarter by quarter, it wasn't the best game. But one thing I did know was I was thinking that it's going to be a good game. The Falcons do have a good chance to win it. I was looking at not too much of the stats, but I was looking at some of the gameplay of them playing, beating my Packers and beating the Seahawks in the playoffs. Try to watch a couple other highlights. Of course, that's not the whole game, because I want to really watch the game and see how the teams are playing, to not just throw you guys stats, and the stats are why the teams are going to win. I don't just want to be that guy. So I watch the game a lot. I feel like I know the game fairly well to bring you guys more than just stats. But one thing I did know was in the first quarter, the Atlanta Falcons, they just dominated the line of scrimmage. They were getting a lot of pressure on on Tom Brady whenever he was throwing in the first quarter. They couldn't run the ball at all. They just really mashed up the line of scrimmage. There was no room for LeGarrette Blount to go anywhere. That first quarter, the Patriots, they couldn't do anything. And then on defense, and then on offense, the Falcons, they were just gashing them on the run. Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman, they were having a nice time in that first quarter. A little bit in the second quarter too, where they're just able to get nice runs and just keep the chains moving. They weren't just getting nice runs; they were getting big 10, 15-yard runs. And a lot of times, it's pretty hard to do that. So for them to be gashing them, I was like, oh boy, this is a big problem for the Patriots, because they're just gashing them. They're making nice passes all over the field. Julio Jones is making some good plays. And then later on, a little bit late in the first quarter, the Falcons, they got fumble recovery. They were able to strip LeGarrette Blount. So then they drove down the field and got a touchdown. So it's 14-0. At that point, it's like, oh boy, this does not look good for having it be a close game. And then when one of the Falcons defenders, I should have got the guy's name, but I forgot to get it. But whenever he caught that pick, I was like, this is probably going to be a blowout. They already got 14-0. They got the pick even before the defender scored. I was like, this is not a good game. This is just going to be a blowout. They're going to win it. The Falcons are going to win big. Because I was looking at the last 8 games they played in the season, and most of the games they won, they blew out their opponents. It was, even though the teams weren't good, they were still, most of those games they won, they just blew everybody out. So just like, this is their MO for the last half of the season. They get on teams and just blow them out, and their defense able to hold them, partially because of that big lead, and it's hard for the other team to come back on them. So it's like, oh boy, this is going to be another one of those. Because I thought the Patriots, they're too good to get blown out. Because their defense, they're able to make sure they're not just letting teams just throw a whole bunch of deep touchdown passes on them. So I was like, oh no, this is not great. But then I was thinking, if I did look at some of the games they lost, in the last 8 games, the Falcons lost the games that they only scored 28 points or less, and they were close games. So I was thinking, and if it's a close game and the Patriots go hold the Falcons to, 21 to 24 points, the Patriots are going to win because those last 8 games, the Falcons showed that they can't win a defensive slugfest because their defense isn't that great with their stats, the yards per game isn't that great. And then points per game, one of the TV broadcasts were saying that they were the worst defensive team in points allowed per game to win it if they did win the Super Bowl. So I was thinking, probably not. So I did predict that they weren't going to win because the pass defense was weak. They allowed too many points, and they couldn't win defensive slugfest because they're and it's not just their defense, but their offense wasn't built. They just don't play in that defensive way where they could just go in and just get in a slugfest and just be able to, wear teams down physically and be able to win those just tough, rugged games. So I was thinking, they're not going to be able to do it. But then later on, the Patriots get a field goal before the half. But then after the Falcons scored that touchdown early in the third quarter, I was thinking, you know what, it's 28-3. There's no way the Patriots could come back from 25. So the first drive, takes them a long time to get that touchdown. So I was thinking, okay, now it's a little interesting because it's not such a blowout. It was 28-10 at that point. Maybe it's 28-9 because he missed the extra point sometime in the game. I was thinking, you know what? Patriots still have too many points. They still have to score, even though there's plenty of time. There's still some time in the third quarter and the whole fourth quarter to come back. They still had to score, a couple touchdowns and 2-point conversions. So it was just, even if the Patriots were able to hold down the Falcons and stop them from scoring a touchdown, still, even if they scored a field goal, the Falcons scored a field goal, it'd still kind of be too many points the Patriots have to make up. And then it just seemed like after that Falcons defense front, they could not get pressure on Brady at all. I mean, especially after that big long drive, they just seemed like they could not just keep winning that line of scrimmage. I'm not sure why, but I mean, just after that, just those long drives that the Patriots kept going on, it just wore out the Falcons' D-line, defensive front. They couldn't win the line of scrimmage, especially with pass rush because, the Patriots, they couldn't really have time to run the ball, but they still weren't running it all that great for the most part. But they just had to keep throwing it. And then really the weakness of the Falcons' defense was their defensive backs. The first quarter, they're just cleaning up the Patriots receivers. They couldn't get open at all. But they just kept getting open and kept making catch after catch, kept getting a whole bunch of first downs. They just kept missing a whole bunch of plays. I mean, they didn't have to make a whole bunch of plays in the second half, but the Falcons' pass defense, especially those defensive backs, they just couldn't cover those receivers. Just kept beat play after play after play, and then they crept up and got the score tied. Then they went to overtime, and then by overtime, when the Patriots got the ball, it was like, man, those Falcons defenders, especially those DBs, they've been getting beat for the whole second half, and a lot of times you just can't get beat like that. It's really hard to come back and make a whole bunch of stops. But a crucial plays were they couldn't get any stops on those 2-point conversions, because even though the Patriots were able to come back and score those 2 touchdowns late in the fourth quarter, they still had to get those 2-point conversions just to tie it up to go to overtime. And those are really crucial plays where it's just, if we make this one play where we got bat the ball down, or we could tackle Damian Ndola before he gets in for that 2-point conversion, or if we could mash the defensive or the line of scrimmage so we could stop that 2-point conversion. I think that James White ran in. Maybe we'll end the game on a defensive play, and they were not able to do that. So just a lot of their just build of just all these high flying blowouts they were able to do, and not being able to win those defensive slugfests where you're not being able to get a whole bunch of big plays on offense. You gotta pound them with your running game, and your defense has gotta make key defensive stops with defending passes and just shut down a lot of runs. They weren't able to do that, especially with getting pressure on Brady at this late in the second half of the fourth quarter. They weren't able to do that, so that's a big reason why they lost, because they just really couldn't make any stops. They couldn't make them punt late in the fourth quarter, or they couldn't stop those 2-point conversions. So I don't think it was one of the best. It was, of course, it was the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history. It's the first Super Bowl to go into overtime. So those are really important, and they're really good to watch. But it wasn't the best Super Bowl. It's not even close. It wasn't even. I don't even think it was a top 4 Super Bowl of all time, because for most of the game, from the time that Falcons defender intercepted the ball before he even scored to about maybe early in the fourth quarter, the game was not exciting to watch, because it was still pretty much out of hand. You still thought, for the most part, the Falcons had it wrapped up for about maybe 2/3 of the game. So when you look at it, when 2/3 of the game, it's not that interesting, because you're thinking the game's wrapped up and the Patriots are just making it interesting because they're able to make sure they're not getting blown out. That's not the best Super Bowl of all time. Such is my opinion. So I'm going to try to bring you guys a little more football talk in the near future. Alright, love you guys, and catch you guys on one of my next videos.